Here we go. All righty. Well, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us here today. My name is Molly. I'm the Craft Boston manager here at the Society of Arts and Crafts. And if you're just getting to know us, the Society of Arts and Crafts is the oldest nonprofit in America dedicated to supporting craft artists and their creativity. I'm joined here today by Sally Prangley, who's an artist participating in our current show, Craft Boston Holiday. It's viewable on our website through January 30th, so plenty of time to take a look and get to know all of the artists who are participating through their online artist profiles, shop the beautiful creations that they've offered to us through our online store, and also get to know more about their stories and their processes through online events just like this one. So we're very excited to be with Sally here today. And without further ado, let me bring up our introduction. Oops. There we go. All right. So welcome, Sally. And before we get too far into our questions for today, I want to say a thank you to all of our partners and sponsors who are supporting Craft Boston Holiday Online. We're so grateful to have so much support, both for ourselves, for our craft artists, and for the creativity that they share with the world. We've been lucky to see Sally's work in 4 of our Craft Boston shows this year, starting with Studs and Drops this spring. We were lucky to see her paper and wire earrings in that show. In Fiber Stories, we got to know her approach to paper and wire basketry. And during Cups of Good, we were introduced to yet another approach to her work, these lovely dessert boxes, which were vessels to be included in Cups of Good. And I'll admit on a personal note that those were some of my favorites, especially this chocolate cake box in the back corner there. And then finally, we've been lucky to see a range of her work on display in Craft Boston Holiday Online, from her beautiful paper and wire jewelry, like these French dictionary portrait earrings and the pop necklace, and also her basketry, which is, again, on view in Holiday Online. Sally studied psychology, art history, and literature at Northwestern University and received an MBA from George Washington University. She had an illustrious career in advertising before leaving to pursue her art full-time. And her work tends to blend traditional basketry and wirework techniques to create unusual objects. All of this work is done by hand, and it uses a variety of materials, including wire, paper, found objects, beads, and more. And Sally's going to tell us all kinds of interesting things about her process in a little bit more detail. But to get us started, Sally, welcome. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for asking me. It's so much fun to invite you all into my studio. It's a rare treat for me as well as it is for all of you to see where I do all my work, where the magic happens.
Indeed. And I'm hoping, Sally, you can get us started by just telling us a little bit about a day in the life of a craft artist working with paper and wire.
Well, first of all, the days are never long enough. I'm at a point in my life where I am a empty nester. The only other person who's sharing my nest is my cat, Sylvester. So that means I don't have to worry about meals for anyone, or to pick someone up or drop someone off, or any of those things. I can focus on my art as much as I want to. And that's what I do. I focus on my art all day long. There is really rarely a minute when I'm not looking at something and finding it in my mental Rolodex for use later, when it will just kind of pop into a concept that I'm working on. So I start my day with a long, brisk morning walk. I'm outside in the dark for about an hour and a half or so. And after I breakfast and play with the cat a bit, I'm in my studio by about 9:30 in the morning, take a brief break for lunch and another quick walk later in the afternoon to get the body moving again. And I work till about 7:30 at night. And I've worked later, but these days I find I really need to have a couple of hours to just kind of decompress before I go at it again the next day. And so I always have multiple projects going on at one time. Right now, I am working on a couple of things. One for the Craft Boston Holiday Show, a pendant out of my facets concept. And I'm working to fulfill some empty inventory for Artful Home, where I need to make another kaleidoscope basket for them. And so that's kind of what I'm working on right now. And then I've got my production list for things. Right now, actually, I've kind of crested the wave for artists. I'm in several other holiday shows that I've been taking, funneling work out since, mid-October for things like that. So now I'm kind of like, okay, everything's there. The pots are all kind of, simmering where they should be. And I can actually catch my breath right now. So that's where I am right now. I'm kind of in the midst of catching my breath, which feels really nice after quite an intense several months.
I can imagine. The holiday season tends to be so hectic for everybody, but I can imagine especially for artists. And you mentioned, it sounds like you always have a lot of different irons in the fire. Is there something that you particularly like about working on more than one project at once?
Well, I work on I may not necessarily work on just one project, but one project has lots of elements. So if I'm in another earring show, and so I don't ever work just on one piece at a time, like earrings. I will have batches of like a dozen earrings at a time that I work on, because there's a whole process to creating it. And part of it is just waiting for the glue to dry or things. So if I'm working on a dozen earrings, I have all the designs on paper in my head that I'm doing, and I kind of batch it out. So first I'll make the wire outline, then I will fill it with paper. And this is maybe what you want to see is, how do I really do this? And then I'll add the color, and then do the final wire working for, the ear hook part, stuff like that. So I will have, a lot of pieces going at once. Then I finish that batch. It's kind of like making a batch of cookies. You get those in the oven, and then they get eaten up, and so you got to make the next batch. And so I'm kind of always on that thing. And so I will have several things in the production queue, and I turn to one and get that done. And then if I know there's a portion of it that's going to take me longer, there's a particular necklace I make that integrates only found objects, I know I have to allow extra time for that one. I can't really do anything else but that at a time. So I kind of sequence things according to what materials I'm working with for them, when they're due, how many of them are due, that kind of thing. So all of that kind of, falls into place, but I'm a big person who uses lots of lists. So I have lots of little lists going, just, and I use my little list. So that's what helps me. Mm-hmm. So in terms of how I do my work, which is, I think, what the big magic and secret is, well, pretty much everything starts with wire coiled up in a spool. And this is a 23 gauge wire. You can see a little bit of it here. And this is a 5-pound spool. So think of bag of sugar. This is a 5-pound spool. And I order all my wire, and have for many years, from a wire manufacturing company in Paramus, New Jersey, who, 25 years ago, when I started working with wire, I had to talk to this guy, Frankie, about baseball for several sessions, until he finally started taking me seriously for wanting all these smaller batches of wire. 5 pounds is what I'll order at a time, sometimes 5 or 10 pounds of every single gauge that I work with. But his customers tend to be larger commercial ones, ordering 100-pound spools of wire. So I really had to work it. I had to suck it in a bit because he's a big Yankees fan. Sorry, I'm Seattle, so I'm a Mariners fan. But anyway, so it all starts with this.
Mhm.
And if it's also paper, then it starts with this too, which is mat board. This is a large piece. By the time I am done using it, it's all really small pieces.
Mhm.
And so what I'll do for a basket, for example, is the first part starts here, and I have to make the frame. And so I know from my experience, I keep a very detailed sketchbooks that are also kind of like recipes,
Mhm.
where I list which gauge of wire I use, the lengths that I use to cut, and what pattern I'm doing. And so this looks pretty naked. This is what I call a skeleton. And
Mhm.
this is where I have woven the basket in terms of everything starts flat. I weave the base, and generally it's a simple over under weave, out about as wide as my notes tell me, as I've learned from experience, that for whatever design, this is a 3-inch base. And so once I've woven the base, I then flip it so it starts going vertical. And in this case, for this one, you can see that there's a close pattern of the wire, and then I make the rim. What happens after that is I then turn it into what I call a ghost. And that's where, this is one of my kaleidoscope baskets that you can see is very much in progress. This is largely a ghost. I've just started adding color. And what I've done is I have decided for all the different wire shapes, and this is a very fun basket to make. All the spokes go up. I did the rim, and then I add long lengths of wire in very curved shapes to get the asymmetry and kind of the pattern and rhythm that I want going for this, because it reminds me, the concept of this is a kaleidoscope. When you look through one of those things, what do you see? And so once I've done that, the next thing I have to do is decide what is going to get paper and color and what's going to remain open. And so I then, as I'm doing that process, I will take, here's an empty one, but I'll take my paper, which is this heavy cards. It's not cardstock, it's like mat board is what it is. It's about a 1/16 of an inch thick. And I will attach it to where I want it to be on both sides or on one side, depending upon how I'm doing it. And I use an ungodly amount of Scotch tape at this point. I tape it, I literally tape it in place. And once I've got everything taped in place, which sounds very haphazard, but it does exactly what I want, which is it just kind of tacks it in place for me for the second phase, which is solidifying it. And that's when I take white tissue paper and literally with a paintbrush in glue, I then paint on the paper. And this is like my version of gesso, where an artist would prime their canvas with gesso. This is how I prime my paper. And what it does is it creates a very hard, solid shape. Yeah, that's the thickness of the paper underneath, and also the glue with the tissue paper, and it creates a neutral zone for me, so I can see, okay, here's where all the color is going to go. And then next up is, all right, let's add the color. And so right now you can see I've learned with these is with this basket, I like to have a sequence and a flow of the colors, but I like it to be balanced around. So I've added some red, and this will probably be all the red I use. So one at the bottom, one at the middle, and one at the top. And then I kind of think of what colors look good in contrast, but don't look jarring next to one another. So I added a yellow and a gray last night. So now for you guys, let's add some blue, because I do like the concept of primary colors and secondary colors. They do kind of have some magic together. I'm going to have to put on my readers right now so I don't, miss what I'm trying to glue. So I'm going to put on, I'm going to put it on right here, because here's the yellow and here's the red. And so I thought, this is my container of glue, which is, I've tried a lot of glues over the years, and I've found a mixture that I like. And it's a basic white glue that I add some water to so that it reaches the viscosity that I like. And here's my paintbrush. And I literally dip my paintbrush in the glue, and I will paint the glue on. And then I take a torn piece of paper, which, because my brush is wet, it picks it up like magic, which is just like so nice and easy. And then I will position it on.
Oh, beautiful.
And I will then paint it in place. And so that means both sides, inside and outside. And so I'll get it to go around the corners. And I really try and stick with a paintbrush more than my fingers, but believe me, my fingers get very messy.
Sally, can you go just oh, you're perfect. That's great.
Okay.
Well, I'm thrilled that you're using blue. Blue is actually my favorite color. So lucky me that we're getting that here today.
And so that's what I do. And then, and I do it until it's all covered. And when something is done, this is what it looks like. Here's a finished basket. Now, in this case, I've got a lot of detail on it, where these are leaves. I call this the winter leaf basket. And so what I've done here is I have painted with paper, tissue paper, black and white, alternating and a rhythm. And then with my handy teeny scissors, I cut slivers of black paper, and I glue those on in the pattern, piece by piece, little bit by little bit, to create the pattern and the design I want. And so that is how, and then when it's all done, it gets several coats of a clear sealant that protects the paper so it doesn't respond to, the oils and skin, or if it's jewelry that you're wearing, that it doesn't, it just protects it so that the paper stays clean and colorful the way it is that I want it to. So that is kind of the condensed version of how something that usually takes me several days at least to make, I've just shown you in a matter of moments. But anyway, that's my basic process.
That's lovely. And it was so interesting to see those two baskets side by side. You've got the kaleidoscope, which has those, the very curved, soft lines, reminded me of your artist statement where you said working with wire is like drawing in the air. Very organic shapes, very bright colors. And then you contrast that with the incredibly precise, meticulous little lines on the leaf basket that, I'm imagining you cutting out each of those little strips and then meticulously lining it up. It's a real interesting, yeah.
I was inspired for all this detail, where I call this kind of cross-hatching, my version of cross-hatching. It was the artist Marie Sendak, who was such a wonderful storyteller and illustrator, Where the Wild Things Are, et cetera, in his earlier books. He was one of the best cross-hatching artists I thought that ever lived. And so I've always been influenced by other artists' work that I've seen in ways that I just kind of recognize it, file it away, and then see if it comes out in my own work, at a later point. And I also believe it's very important to give credit where an inspiration is due. And of course, Marie Sendak is just such a wonderful artist that it's just kind of my little homage to Marie.
Absolutely. And that's been one of my favorite parts of getting to know your work, is always in the description. There's a story of, this piece was inspired by a chewing gum wrapper, or, a story from your grandmother, which I think we saw in Cups of Good. And it seems like your ideas really come and your inspiration comes from a lot of different sources. Are there any new ideas in the works that we can be looking forward to in the coming years?
Yes. Oh, of course. that is part of the fun for me about being an artist, is always coming up with new ideas. And in some cases, I need to stay more focused because I really cover a really pretty wide spectrum, from making jewelry to basketry and boxes. Here's a box right here, which is a facets box, which is kind of similar to the facets jewelry. And in fact, the box started out just a sculpture and then turned to a box and then turned to jewelry. But what I have found by taking experience in one dimension and transferring it to another, it just it opens up new ideas for me even more. And I've learned to kind of really get comfortable in working with papers and wire together, and then making it do different things, and finding out for different shapes I don't need as much wire, or for some other shapes I really do need a lot of wire, you know, inside of it. But for coming up for next year, one of the things I want to kind of circle back to that I started working on years ago was working with fiber optics. And that is adding an element of lighting to my work. And we're not talking lampshades. I'm not interested in making lampshades, but I am interested in the concept of light. And what I had done several years, probably a good 10, 15 years ago, when I first started exploring fiber optics, was creating more organic looking sculptures that were essentially flowers that I worked with latex rubber tubing and wove that with the wire into these shapes that I then made the flower part out of wire with beads and some paper then. But the center part of the flower was the endpoints for all the fiber optic lighting, so that underneath it, you flipped a little switch and the center of the flower bloomed. And so that is something I want to return to, because I still have a fair amount of fiber optics, and I'm not sure why I did that for a time and then I moved to something else, probably because just sometimes I don't understand why, but I recognize I need to set something aside. And so I just set it aside, and I knew that when what I'd learned from that would kind of gel within me, and whenever it was ready to come out again, it would. And in fact, it was last week or so, I was thinking, I think it's time to explore fiber optics more, because now that I've gotten into more sculptural forms, I think that amount of lighting would be really interesting. And I've been also very interested with the concept of facets, because to me, facets are all about our lives, that just depending upon which facet faces forward or out, it's a different experience. And by the time, you've lived a lot, and you get a lot of facets. And so that whole concept really interests me. And so I have made one basket out of just paper, very little wire, a facets basket. I made one and actually sold very quickly to a woman who's a very loyal and wonderful collector of my work. She snapped that up, right away. So I want to return to that and explore that more, where it's my baskets that are more paperboard, but it had windows in it where you could see through the structure. And that's where I think lighting would be really interesting as an element. So that is something that is definitely on my list to be exploring more. And I have had a lot of shapes in my head for more basketry with wire and paper that I want to pursue. And one of the evolutions is that I don't want to have this may sound like minor to you, but for me, it's pretty big, because we're talking physics of working with wire and wanting to have a solid piece. But I learned enough about working with wire and paper that I don't want to have defined rim any longer. I want it to go up and out and create a lot more shapes. And and continue in asymmetry, but not be confined by this up here. So that is something that I've got some sketches going for wire and paper basketry that I want to do, and keep adding more three-dimensional aspects to the basketry and also to my jewelry. So it's just, I can talk forever. I can work forever. I feel I'm just having so much fun. It is such a joy to me to be in my studio, and I just get so much joy from doing this that it is just really, really rewarding to me to be able to spend the time and intensity that I want to in working on my artwork and pushing it in different dimensions. It's just very, very rewarding to me.
I mean, I think that's the best part of the story for all of us to hear. You know, it's always good to hear that, you know, that passion is bringing you so much joy. And it's been really, you know, very enjoyable for us as well to see the facets trend evolving, or maybe trend is the wrong word, but to see that idea evolving throughout the course of this year. You know, we saw some of your facets, earrings, and studs and drops, and I know there have been a couple in holiday as well. And I've always loved the note that you include in the description, you know, that they can be turned so that they can be worn with any side facing forward. And it seems like that really resonates with that theme of, you know, kind of being able to explore the different sides and different areas of an idea. We are coming up on the end of our time here today. So I am a little, you know, just looking for the last couple of things we want to touch on before we wrap up. I know you've got so many exciting ideas that you're looking forward to for next year, but maybe in these last couple of minutes, we can take a look back into the past. I know you have some very traditional basketry roots, and I'm curious how that's informing, you know, this desire to get away from the rim at the top of your basket. And I'm curious how that sort of relates to it.
Yes, we talked earlier that I actually have the very first basket I made. And I took traditional reed basketry many years ago. This is the first basket I made. And if you look at the evolution of that to what I'm working on now, it is quite an evolution. And what was your question again now?
Sure. It's, you know, how that traditional basketry experience is influencing the ideas that you're exploring in paper and wire, you know, wanting to get away from that top rim or sort of some of the other techniques that you're using.
Well, I think that what is my constant beacon that I look to is another artist whose name is Merritt Oppenheim. And she has, in the Museum of Modern Art in New York, what to me was a pivotal piece when I saw it when I first moved to New York many decades ago. And it is a fur bowl and spoon. And just by, I mean, it was bowl shaped and it was certainly spoon shaped, but it was made with fur. And that completely, it took me, it like one of those, it blew my mind where it was like, wow, that is so transformational. And that's what I love, things out of context. For whatever reason, I like doing that. And so again, for me to push the context of a basket, which baskets have rims, but now it's like climbing mountains in a way. I've made many of these, and now I want to climb the next mountain, which is making a basket, but that stretches the boundaries of basketry for me, in terms of being even less traditional with its construction. And we'll see how it turns out. It may be one of those that just stays in the bottom of the closet. You know, there are quite a few of those that most artists have, the work that is really experimental. It's part of the learning curve. And so I hope to have some learning curves next year, because to me, I have to always keep on telling myself yes, giving myself permission to do the unexplored, to don't settle for what you've been doing for so long. It's not about being new, but it's more the experience of growth for me in wanting to curious. I'm just curious. What would happen if I did this? Wow, it would look really interesting. And so I want to take it from the ideas on paper and to actualize it. And so again, there's a really wonderful blog called Contemporary Basketry that I get every day in my mailbox, and I'm just totally spaced on her name right now. But it's a very long time well-known, whose name I'm just forgetting, basket maker who puts it out. And it just brings such pleasure to me because every day it's the concept of basketry, but it is far broader in terms of that interpretation of basketry. And that is very inspirational to me, to see how everybody ends up finding their niche with what works for their mind and their fingers and their heart and their soul and whatever material they're working with, and it comes out. And that to me is so much of the joy in what I do.
I love that note to end on, the thinking the the relationship between the fingers and the mind and the heart and the soul. That really really resonated for me. So Sally, I want to say a huge thank you again for your time here today, and thank you to everyone who's been watching. I have one last thing to share with us all, if you'll give me just a moment. Oops, there we go. And it's just a formal way of saying thank you, a way to help you all see more of Sally's work that's on view in Craft Boston Holiday Online, the URL directly to her artist profile. You can also visit her website, sallyprangley.com, where you'll see more of her work beyond even what's available with us right now. And if you enjoyed this conversation, if you'd like to support the Society of Arts and Crafts, we welcome support from donors large and small. You can go to societyofcrafts.org and then go to support us. Or if you're on your phone, you can text CB LOVE, LOVE, to 44321. And thank you again so much, everyone, for being here with us today. Sally, thank you for your time and your enthusiasm. I know we could go on and on, probably for at least another 3 sessions, but thank you. It's been really a pleasure, and I'll look forward to seeing more of your work as it comes into the show later this year, and hopefully beyond that as well.
Well, thank you. It's my joy. Thank you.
Excellent. All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Oops.